The way house at the ninth stone had never once been cold at dawn, not in my lifetime, not in my father's. I came up the salt road with the sky still the color of wet slate and saw the door standing open, and no smoke, and I knew before I dismounted. I had rehearsed something on the ride out. That is the part I would take back first, if the road gave things back to men like me. Inside, her grate was gray all the way through, not banked, not warm under the ash, dead hours dead. The long table was wiped. The travelers' cups hung on their pegs in the order she kept them, biggest to smallest, the chipped one at the end because she would not throw out a thing that still held water. Her ledger sat closed and squared to the table edge, and the salt jar sat on top of it to keep the pages from lifting, and every one of those small tidinesses was a door shutting in my face. "Ansel," I said. The boy came out of the stable rubbing his eyes, saw who was standing in the doorway of a cold way house at dawn, and went white to the lips. "My lord king." "Where is she?" "Gone, my lord." "Gone where?" "North," he swallowed. "She paid out her account with the post company. She counted the coin onto the table and made me sign the book as witness, and she said the fire was mine to keep or not, and she went at first light, walking." He said it the way a man says a thing he has already turned over 100 times and cannot make sit right. She had a pack made up. Bread, salt, a blanket, her mother's knife. It was made up already, my lord. Days ago, maybe. It was under the counter with the wax on it. She left no word. "For the company, my lord, not for," he stopped. "Not for me," I said. "No, my lord." 9 years I had come up that road. 9 years I had stopped at that stone the way water stops at the bottom of a hill without deciding to, and she had put a cup in front of me, and told me who had passed that week, and what the roads were doing, and whether the ice had come to the Ilfen crossing, and she had never once asked me for anything, and I had taken that for contentment, because it cost me nothing to take it for contentment. I stood in her cold kitchen, and did the only thing I knew how to do, which was to be a king about it. "Ride to the post house at the 14th, I told the man at my back. "Tell them the crown wants the road watched, every stone to the cold mark." Then I went back out into the gray and stood by the milestone itself, the old worn 9th stone with the salt road mark cut into it, and the number came into my head. 9. Not a thought, not a guess. The way you know where your own hand is in the dark. 9 stones between the sole of my boot and her, north on my own road, moving. I want to be honest about the next part because I have been dishonest about myself for long enough. I did not fall to my knees. I did not weep. I stood there and I thought, I am ill. I thought, I have not slept, because the road sense is a Rendell thing and it is a blood thing. My father could find my mother across 4 provinces in a snowstorm and never lift his head from his soup. He could find me. He could find my brother, dead these 20 years, right up to the hour he was dead. Blood. Kin. It has never in the history of my line found anyone else, and it had never in 9 years found her, not once, not when she was 6 feet away on the other side of that table pouring my cup. 9, then while I stood there 10. She was walking. The day before, the council had voted. I should say it plainly, since she is not here to say it for me, and I have discovered that I am the only person in Carneth who will tell the truth about Ivar Rendell at speed. The Coldmark wanted a marriage. They had wanted it for 3 years. Havard Sabe, my chancellor, a good man and a patient one, had laid it out again on that gray table with his hands flat on either side of the map. The northern passes, the salt tax, the 1,400 spears that come with a wife and go away with a refusal. Ilspet of the Coldmark, 26 years old, sensible, decent, entirely blameless in this, who deserved better than to be a spear count on a map, and who I hope has had a long life since and never thinks of me at all. They put the paper in front of me, and I did what I had done every time for 3 years. Later, I said, after the leaving when the road's clear. And Havard, who has known me since I was a boy with scabs on both knees, said the thing that everyone in that room had been not saying for 3 years. He said, "My lord, there is a woman at the ninth stone." The room went so quiet I could hear the fire. "There is," I said. "Then say so." I said later. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he bowed because he is a good man, and good men are the ones who let you off. "Later, my lord," he said. And that was the vote, delayed, deferred, set gently down on the table like a cup you mean to come back to. Every man in that room went home and wrote to somebody that the king had put it off again, and in the morning I got on a horse to ride 9 stones north and tell her, what? I have tried to reconstruct it and I cannot, and I have come to think that is because there was nothing in it. I was going to sit at her table and drink what she gave me and be near her and go home. That is what I had been doing for 9 years. That was the whole of my great intention. I had rehearsed it and it was nothing. But she had been strange the week before, and I had noticed, and I had done nothing, and that is the second thing I would take back. I had come up on the third day and she was standing outside in the cold with her hand flat on the milestone, not leaning, not resting, her palm on it the way you touch a horse you thought was dead. "Mara," I said. She turned around, and I have never in my life been looked at like that before or since. There was no surprise in it. There was no gladness in it, which I had grown fat on and never once earned. She looked at me the way a widow looks at a portrait, with an enormous, exhausted, finished tenderness from a very long way off, across something that had already happened. Then she blinked and it was gone, and she said, "You're early, my lord," and went in and put a cup in front of me. I sat at that table and I asked her about the roads, because that is what I asked her. 9 years, and I asked her about the roads. She answered. She always answered. And then in the middle of it, in the middle of the ice at Ilfin and the wool coming down late, she stopped and set down the cloth she was folding and said, without any particular weight, "Have you ever asked me anything?" I laughed. God help me, I laughed. "I ask you everything. I ask you every week." "You ask me about the road," she said. "You ask me what other people are doing on it." She picked the cloth back up. "You'll put it off again tomorrow, you know. Sabe will say my name out loud and you'll say later and go home, and you'll come here on 5th day and ask me if the ice has come. I want to tell you that I heard it. I did not hear it. I heard a woman being sharp with me, which she had never been, and I was pleased by it, because sharpness is a kind of attention, and I had been living on her attention for 9 years the way a man lives on a fire he never once brought wood for. "Then I'll come on 5th day," I said, "and you can tell me about the ice." She looked at me. She said, "I know." And she smiled, and she took my cup away, and I went home well pleased with myself, and the next morning she was 10 stones north and walking. 11 by the time I got back to the capital, 14 by dark. I had my physician in, which tells you what kind of man I was that week. He looked at my eyes and asked whether I had pain in my head, and I said no, there is a number in it. He asked what the number was, and I said 14. He asked what would happen if I stopped thinking about it, and I said nothing would happen. It isn't a thought, it's a place. It's northeast, and it's 14 stones out, and it has moved twice since you came in the room. He gave me something to help me sleep. I did not take it. I sat up in the dark with a number in my skull like a splinter under the nail, and I understood, somewhere around the 3rd hour, that I was not ill. The road sense is a blood thing, it finds your own. And it had never found her, not in 9 years across her own table. I want to put down exactly what I thought at that hour, because I have heard men in ballads have some fine ringing revelation, and mine was not fine. I thought, it needs distance. That is all it was. A stupid, plain, mechanical thought, like understanding at last why a lock has been sticking. The sense is a measure, and a measure needs something to measure. She had never once gone anywhere. She had stood at the 9th stone for 9 years while I came and went and came and went. And there was never a distance between us to read. And so the one instrument my blood gave me sat dead in my chest, and I took its silence for the natural condition of the world. She was mine. The proof of it was the 14 stones. The only way I could ever have learned it was for her to leave. That is what I have to live with. That is the size of it. Every man in that council chamber knew before I did, and the road knew, and she knew, she knew. She had known for longer than I can account for. And the king of Karnath, who can find any of his blood in a blizzard, needed a woman to walk out of his life before he could locate her at all. In the morning, I did the second stupidest thing of my life. I sent riders. The 41st, I said. Sabe looked at the map, then at me. My lord, the sighting from the post house says the 38th. That was yesterday. She's at the 41st. She's stopped. She's been stopped since before dawn. Stopped. Stopped, I said, for 4 hours, and I would very much like to know why, and you will send a rider to the 41st stone and you will not send him to the 38th, because she is not at the 38th, she is at the 41st. He is a good man, Havard Sabe. He did not ask me how I knew. He sent the rider. And the rider came back 2 days later with his hat in his hands, and a look on his face I have seen on men who have watched something they will now believe for the rest of their lives, and he said, "The 41st stone, my lord," standing at it, waiting out the rain under the eaves of a dead chapel, exactly where you said. And Sabe, very quietly, in a room with 4 other men in it, said, "How long has the sense worked on her, my lord?" 6 days, I said. And before that? Never. He shut his eyes. I have known that man 40 years, and I have seen him keep his face through 2 wars and a plague. He shut his eyes. My lord, he said, oh my lord. So I was a king about it. I want it recorded that I was very kingly indeed. I sent a summons. A proper one, under seal, courteous, with an escort of 4 and a horse for her, and a warrant that would have carried her through any gate in Karnath. The crown requests the attendance of Mara Talving. She sent the horse back. She sent the escort back. She sent the seal back, unbroken, and she sent no letter, and the captain of the 4 stood in front of me with his jaw working, and told me what she had said, because I made him, because I was the kind of man who made him. She had read the name on the outside. She had not opened it. She had handed it back and said, "Tell him the answer is the same one it was for 40 years. He just never had to hear it before." 40 years, I said. That's what she said, my lord. She's 29. Yes, my lord, said the captain and looked at the floor. I sent money next. I am not going to dress that up. I sent a purse north with a man on a fast horse, and I told myself it was so she could sleep dry, and she gave it to a family at the 50th stone who had lost their cart, and walked on, and my sense told me she walked on, 62 stones out, 63, 65, and I sat in my own hall and felt every single one of them go by like a stone laid on my chest, one at a time, patiently, by someone who had all the time in the world. I want to be exact about what it felt like, because he missed her is not it, and I will not be let off that easily. It felt like a room in my own house that I had walked past for 9 years without opening, and I opened it, and it was full floor to ceiling, wall to wall, of everything she had ever put in it. Every cup set down in front of me. Every night she had kept a fire I never thanked her for. Every week she had told me about other people's journeys. 9 years of a woman's hands stacked to the roof, and I had never gone in, because the door was always going to be there, and so was she. And now the room was mine, and she was 65 stones away, and the only reason I knew that was that she had finally left it. Havard came to me on the 9th night and stood with his back to the fire and said, "You will have to go and get her." "I've sent." "You have sent men and seals and money," he said. "Which is what a king sends. She has not refused a king, my lord. She has never once in her life refused a king. She has refused you, and you have not been anywhere near her." "She won't have me." "No," said Sabe, "probably she won't." He was quiet a moment. "Go anyway." I went out on the salt road on foot on the first morning of the leaving, when half of Karnath is walking somewhere, and nobody looks twice at one more man with a pack. And it took me 11 days to make up the ground that she had made in 6, which tells you what 9 years of sitting at her table had done to me. I caught her at the 72nd stone. The road wolves found her before I did 3 of them, out of the ditch grass, gray and dust-colored, the long-legged road stock that runs the post routes and takes bread off anyone who offers it. They went to her the way they go to the post riders they know. She put out the back of her hand without looking up, and one of them shoved its head under it, and she said, "Hello, you," and only then did she raise her eyes and see me standing in the road 20 feet off with a pack on my back and 11 days of beard. She did not startle. That was the worst of it. She looked at me and she was not surprised, not for one instant, and I understood that whatever else was happening, she had known I would be standing in this road at this stone on this day. "My lord," she said. "Mara, you look terrible. I've walked 72 stones." "You've walked 63, she said. "You rode to the 9th. You always ride to the 9th. And she turned and went on walking, and the wolves went with her, and I stood in the road like a post for the space of 3 heartbeats and then went after her like a boy. "Mara, Mara, stop, please stop." She stopped. She turned around. And there it was again, that look from the Third, the widow and the portrait, the enormous finished tenderness from very far away. "I've been doing sums," she said, "for 6 weeks. Do you want to hear them?" "Yes." 9 years you came to my fire. Say 40 weeks a year that the road's open. That's 360 cups. She said the numbers the way she used to say the road report, evenly, a woman who has kept a ledger her whole life. 360 times you sat down and asked me about the ice and the wool and who had passed. And not once, my lord, in 360 cups, did you ask me where I wanted to go. Then I'm asking. Don't, she said it so gently. That was the cruelty of it. There was no anger anywhere in her at all, and I would have given my crown for anger. Don't do it in the road because I've cornered you into it. I've had that. I've had a whole life of a man doing the right thing 4 minutes after it stopped being worth anything. A life, I said. You keep saying that, 40 years, a life. Mara, what life? And she looked at the sky, and something went over her face that I have thought about every day since. A kind of tiredness that no woman of 29 has any right to. The tiredness of somebody who has already carried the whole thing to the end once and knows exactly what it weighs. Send your wagons round by the ford, she said. What? The grain wagons. You've got 60 wagons coming down to the capital for the leaving tolls, and they're routed over the Ilfen Bridge, and the bridge goes tonight between the 3rd and 4th hour in the rain, with the eastern pier going first. She shouldered her pack. Send them round by the ford. It costs you 2 days. It saves you 9 drivers and their teams, and a man named Pelcorin who has a daughter born in the spring. The Ilfen Bridge is stone, I said. It stood 90 years. 91, said Maratalvin, and walked away north. I sent the riders. I want that on the record too. I sent them, and I did not believe her when I sent them, and I have had to live with the fact that I sent them out of love and not out of belief. The bridge went that night, between the 3rd and 4th hour in the rain. The eastern pier went first. Havard Sabe met me on the road at the 79th stone with 2 horses and no escort and his hat in his hand, and he had ridden 4 days to do it, and he was 61 years old. 9 drivers, he said, and the teams. And Pelcorin. I know. They were sitting on the ford bank in the rain playing at dice and cursing your name because you'd cost them 2 days, and at the 4th hour the Ilfen Bridge went into the water and they could hear it from where they sat. He turned his hat around in his hands. The eastern pier first, my lord. I know Havard. How did she know? She didn't guess it, I said. I want you to understand that. A guess is a thing with a shape. The bridge is old, the rain is heavy, the piers are scoured. She didn't do any of that. She said it the way you'd say the wool comes down late in 10th month. She said 91 when I said 90. Sabe stood in the salt road with the wind pulling at his coat and looked north, at nothing, at the empty gray ribbon going up over the hill. He is not an imaginative man. That is why I have kept him near me my whole life. He deals in spear counts and tolls and the shortest distance between two facts, and I watched him arrive at the only place those facts led, and I watched it take him a full minute to get there, and when he did his mouth went thin. She's been here before, he said. Yes. Not the road here, this. Yes. Then she knows what happened, he said. Last time she knows what you did. Yes, I said, she knows what I did. He put his hat on. My lord, he said, I have advised you for 40 years. I am going to give you the last piece of advice I have, and then I am going to go home and mind the tolls, because I am not equal to this and I know it. He gathered his reins. Whatever you did, don't do it again. That's all I've got. That's the whole of it. Don't do the same thing. And he rode south, and I never spoke to him about her again, and he never once asked. I caught her at the 84th. She was sitting on the step of a shut-way house with her boots off and her feet in the grass, and she had a needle in the strap of her pack where it had begun to fray, and she was mending it before it broke rather than after, which is the whole of Mara Talvin in one sentence. They lived, I said, the drivers. I know, she said, and bit off the thread. You could have written it down. You could have sent it to the post company and stayed in your own kitchen and let 9 men live and never seen my face again. I could have. She pushed the needle back into the seam of her cuff. Would you have sent the writers for a letter? I did not answer because we both knew. No, she said, without any triumph in it at all. You sent them because I said it to your face in the road. That's not a compliment, my lord. That's the diagnosis. She put her boots on. She stood. She started walking. And I walked beside her, and she did not stop me, and it took me 11 more stones to understand that not stopping me was not the same as letting me come. We made rules at the 90th in the rain, under the eaves of a barn, where the road wolves had got in ahead of us, and lay steaming in the straw. You can walk, she said. It's a public road. I don't own it, and neither do you, whatever the maps say. Mara, you don't ask me to come back, not once. If you ask me to come back, I'll go east and you can count the stones till you're gray. She wrung the water out of her hair, matter of fact, a woman who has been rained on before. You don't send anybody. No riders, no purses, no seals, no men in the ditch keeping a watch on me for my own good. And you don't pull the crown out. Not on me, not on a way housekeeper, not on a ferryman, not on anybody. If I see you be the king at one single person on this road to make my life easier, I'm gone. That's everything I have. Yes, said Mara, that's rather the point. So I walked. I want to be plain about how badly I did it at first. I had never in my life been in a place where I could not fix a thing by opening my mouth. At the 94th, the way housekeeper had no bread, and I got as far as the shape of the sentence. Do you know who I am? And I looked up, and she was watching me across the room with an expression of such enormous patience that I shut my mouth and ate cold porridge and was grateful for it. At the 103rd, a carter's axle split, and I put my shoulder under the bed of the wagon with 2 strangers, and held it while they blocked it, and nobody knew me. And I have been in 4 battles, and I do not remember any of them as clearly as I remember the weight of that wagon, and the carter saying good lad to the king of Carneth. At the 111th I asked her, at last, the thing I had been carrying since the 72nd. Tell me about the 40 years. No, she said. That was all, not sharply. She just said no, the way you'd decline a second helping, and went on walking, and the road wolves went ahead of us in the dust, and I let it be. And that the letting it be was the first good thing I had done in 9 years. Here is what the road gave me instead in pieces over 18 days. None of them asked for. That she had a mother who died at the 9th stone and a father who did not. And that the way house was her mother's, and the ledger was her mother's hand for the first 60 pages, and hers for the next 400. That she had wanted, at 19, to see the salt flats at the top of the world, where the road ends and the country stops, and there is nothing but white and the sky sitting on it, and that she had never gone, because there was a fire to keep and travelers coming, and the road does not care what you wanted at 19. That she could not sing. She told me this with great seriousness at a fire at the 120th, as though confessing a crime, and I laughed for the first time in a month, and she looked at me sidelong and something moved in her face and went away again. That she gave bread to the road wolves every day of her life and would not have one in the house, on principle, because they're not dogs, my lord, they're travelers. That she had been asked 4 times in her life by men on that road, decent men, one of them twice, and that she had said no every time, and had never told a soul why, and did not tell me either, and did not need to, and I walked 11 stones with that stone in my boot. And that she counted everything. She counted the stones out loud under her breath when she was tired. She counted the coins into the weighhouse tins. She counted the days of the leaving. She had counted 360 cups. It was not a habit. It was the shape her whole mind had taken from a life spent measuring other people's journeys while standing perfectly still. On the 19th day, the letter caught us up. A post-rider on the road, not mine, the company's, running the ordinary bags, and he had one for the Crown because the Crown had left word to be found. I broke the seal standing in the road. Sabe's hand, 4 lines, no ornament. My lord, the Coldmark has withdrawn the offer of marriage, the lady being unwilling to be the second thing a man considers. Ilsbeth Sabe of the Coldmark is betrothed to her cousin Aaron, and I am told she laughed when she signed it. The council voted this morning to let the northern passes stand as they are. We lose the 1,400 spears. We keep the salt tax. Nobody died. HS. I stood there and read it twice. Mara was 50 feet up the road. She had not stopped. She never stopped for anything. She withdrew, I called. Yes. Mara, I caught her up. Mara, she withdrew the whole thing's 3 years of that paper on that table, and she withdrew and nothing happened. The passes are the same. The tax is the same. Nobody died. I was almost laughing. That is how far gone I was. It was nothing. The entire thing was nothing. I put you off for 3 years for a thing that came apart on its own the moment I stopped touching it. And she turned around. I know, she said. 2 words, and all the air went out of the road. You know, I said. I knew in 5th month. I knew the day Sabe said my name at the table. She said it evenly, but her hands had gone still at her sides, and Mara's hands were never still. I knew she'd withdraw, my lord. I knew it before she did, because she didn't the last time, because the last time you signed it. The wind came up the road and went past us and away. You married her, I said. You married her, said Mara Talvin. On the 11th of 9th month in the capital, and it rained, and the passes stayed open, and the salt tax went down, and it was a good marriage as those go, and she was kind to you, and you were kind to her, and I got the news from a wool carter at the 9th stone at about 4 in the afternoon while I was writing up the ledger. She looked at me. And on 5th day you came up the road and sat at my table and asked me if the ice had come to the Ilfen crossing. I could not speak. And I told you, she said, because I always told you, and then you went home, and you came back the next week, and the week after, for 31 more years, my lord. Every week the road was open. You rode 9 stones north and sat at my fire and asked me about other people's journeys, and then you rode home to your wife. And neither of you ever did one single wrong thing, not one. There was nothing in it anybody could have written down, and I sat there and kept the fire, and I was 50, and I was 60, and I was 68, and 1/5 day you didn't come because you were dead, and I kept it 8 more years anyway. And then I died on that road at 76 with my hand on that stone, and the last thing I thought was, he never asked me anything. She was not crying. I want that understood. She said all of it in her road report voice, the ice and the wool and the 40 years, evenly, a woman reading out a ledger she had balanced long ago. 40 years, she said, of being the thing you didn't have to decide about, that's what I was. Not a woman you scorned, you were never cruel to me. You were never anything but glad to see me, and that's worse, my lord, that is so much worse, because a cruel man you can leave. You were a good man who assumed. You assumed the fire would be lit. You assumed the cup would be there. You assumed I would be there at the 9th stone, warm, at the end of 9 easy miles for the whole of your life, and I was. I proved you right for 40 years, and it killed me. And then she said the thing I hear at night. And you didn't do anything wrong, she said. That's the whole horror of it. Nobody could ever have shown you a moment and said there that that's where you did it. You did it 360 times. You did it every single time you sat down and didn't ask. I got out one word, how. I don't know how, she said. I woke up. It was the morning of the vote. I was at the stone with the ash still warm and my hands were young and I had all of it in my head, all 40 years of it, and I could hear you coming up the road. She shouldered her pack. I had until noon to decide whether to be that woman again. I made bread. I was going to make bread and put the cup out and see you, and I nearly did it, my lord. I nearly did it, because I loved you, and because the fire wanted lighting, and because it is so much easier to be the woman who stays. And you walked. And I walked, said Mara, before I could smell the smoke. I did the wrong thing 11 days later, at the 152nd stone in the dark, and I did it out of love, which is no defense and never has been. We had come up onto the high salt country by then. It gets strange up there. The road runs dead straight for 9 stones at a stretch. The way houses stand a full day apart. The light goes on for hours after the sun's down, and there's a white glare off the pans that gets into your teeth. She had been quiet for 2 days. I had been building it in my head the whole time, the way I built the thing I was going to say on the ride to the 9th, and I had learned nothing at all, because I stood up at that fire and I said, "Come back and be my queen." She looked at me for a long moment. "There's nobody in the way now," I said. "The cold mark is gone. The council will do as it's told. You'd never keep a fire again as long as you lived. Nobody would ever ask you for a cup or a bed or a road report. You'd have 100 women to do it and 40 years of anything you wanted, and I would spend every day of it." "Stop," she said. "Please stop. You're going to embarrass us both." I stopped. "Look what you just did," said Mara very gently. "Look at it. I told you I died waiting for a man to ask me a question, and you stood up and offered me a position." She shook her head slowly. "You've made it bigger. That's your whole answer to everything, my lord, make it bigger. A cup, then a crown. It's the same road. You still haven't asked me a single thing. You've just raised the wage." "Then what do you want?" I shouted it. I am not proud of it. 200 stones from my own hall in the white dark, I shouted at her. "Tell me what you want and I'll do it. I'll do any of it. "That's not a question," she said. "That's a door you're holding open, so I'll walk through it and let you off." She got up and banked the fire because she could not help banking a fire, and I watched her hands do it. "You still want me to save you the trouble?" "Same as the cups." She stood with her back to me for a while. "I'm not going to do it," she said to the dark. "I want to. That's what nobody tells you about a second life. It doesn't make you love him less. It just makes you know exactly what it costs." And in the morning she was gone up the road at first light, 5 stones out before I woke, and I lay in the ashes of that fire and felt every one of them arrive in my skull. And for the first time in my life, I did not get up and go after a thing I wanted. I lay there until noon. Then I got up and walked north slowly, badly at her pace and not mine, and I did not close the gap for 9 days. 5 stones. That is what I had. I let 5 stones stand between us for 9 days because she had asked me for room, and it was the first thing she had ever asked me for in her life, and I would like it noted that it was the hardest thing I have ever done, and that it was the very least of what I owed her, and that those two facts sitting side by side is the true measure of the man she waited 40 years for. She let me come back on the 10th day. She did not say anything about it. She had a fire going at the 191st, and there were 2 cups by it, and I sat down and did not touch mine until she handed it to me. "The Corin's child," she said out of nowhere, watching the fire. "Pell's girl, the one born in the spring." "What about her?" "They'll name her after the bridge," she said. "They won't mean to. They'll mean to name her after her grandmother, and her grandmother was born at Ilfen, and the name'll come out of the letter your chancellor writes you in about 6 days." She turned a stick in the coals. "Ilfa. They'll spell it with an F." "Why are you telling me that?" "Because you'll get the letter," said Meritalvin, "and you'll read the name, and you'll know I'm not mad, and you'll know I'm not clever, and you'll know it's not a gift." She looked up at me across the fire, and there was something in her face I had not seen once in 9 years or 200 stones. She looked afraid. "I'm running out," she said. "Out of what?" "Things I know." She put the stick down. "The bridge, the vote, the child, that's the end of it, my lord. That's everything that happened before the 12th of 9th month in a life where I never left the 9th stone. After the child, the road goes dark. I've never been past the 200 stone in my life, either of them." The fire cracked. Somewhere out in the white dark, a road wolf said something to another road wolf. "6 days," she said. "Then I'm just a woman walking, same as you." The letter came on the 6th day, at the 200th stone, in the hands of a post-rider, who did not know he was carrying the end of the world. I broke the seal standing in the road with her 20 feet off, and I did not want to read it. That is worth saying. 6 days I had walked toward that letter the way a man walks toward a verdict, and when it was in my hand, I stood there in the white glare with my thumb under the wax, and understood that I had been hoping, quietly, shamefully, in the part of a man that never grows up, that she would be wrong. Not mad, not lying, just wrong once about one small thing, so that the whole of it could be a coincidence and a fever and 9 years of nothing, and I could take her home and never have to know what I had cost her. Sabe's hand. The tolls, the passes, the salt sheds at Coldmark wanting a new roof, and at the bottom because he is a good man and thought I would like to know. The Corin girl was named at last, Ilfa. They meant it for the grandmother who came from the crossing, and the drivers have made a great deal of it. They say the name is the bridge's fault and the bridge is the king's fault, and so the child is the king's fault, and they have drunk your health on it more than once. They spell it with an FHS. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it up and put it inside my coat, and I looked up the road at her. She was standing at the 200 stone with one hand flat on it. Not leaning, not resting, the way you touch a horse you thought was dead. "Ilfa," I said, with an F. Meritalvin took her hand off the stone and looked past it, north, at 9 stones of dead straight white road running up to nothing at all. "Well," she said, "that's me done then. You have to understand what that stone was. It was not a border. There is no border there. Carneth just gets thinner and thinner until it stops caring. It was a milestone the same as every other milestone, the number cut in by some mason 200 years ago and the salt eating at the bottom of it, and the road went on past it exactly as it had gone on past the 199 before it. It was the edge of everything she had ever known about her own life. On the near side, 40 years of memory, the ledger, the fire, the wool coming late, the 11th of 9th month, a wool carter with the news at 4 in the afternoon, 31 years of 5th days, and a woman of 76 dying on a road with her hand on a stone. On the far side in both her lives, nothing. She had never been past it. She had never had 1 hour past it. She had spent one whole life measuring other people's journeys from a chair beside a fire, and the entire body of her knowledge, the bridge, the vote, the child, the king, the world ran out at a number cut into a rock. She stood there a long moment with her pack on. I've been afraid of this since the 9th, she said. Not you, this. I know. You don't. You've been past it. You've been to the cold mark and the salt sheds and the top of the road, and you rode it in a week with 40 men. She was looking north the whole time. I've been past it 3,000 times in my head, sitting at that table, listening to Carters tell me what it looked like. Do you know what that does to you? Everybody who ever came through my door had been somewhere. Every single one. They'd sit at my fire and tell me about the white at the top of the world and drink what I poured, and then they'd get up and go, and I'd wash the cup. She took a breath. And now there's nothing on the other side of it, she said. No memory, no ledger. I don't know what happens tomorrow. I've never once in either life not known what happens tomorrow, because the answer was always nothing. Nothing happens tomorrow. Somebody comes through and I pour it. You could go back, I said. She turned and looked at me. You could, I said. That's not me asking. I want to be clear, Mara, that is not me asking. You could go back to the 9th and light it and know exactly what every day of the rest of your life holds. Nobody would ever be able to hurt you again. You'd never be surprised as long as you lived. I found my voice was not entirely steady. I have been on the other side of that stone my whole life, and I'm telling you, it's cold and there's nothing there, and you don't get told what happens tomorrow. It's just walking. Why are you telling me that? Because you've had one man arrange your life for 40 years by never mentioning the parts he didn't want you to weigh, I said. I'm not doing it twice. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, huh, which is what Mara Talving says instead of anything larger, and she walked past the 200 stone into the rest of her life without breaking stride, and I went after her, and neither of us said one word for 4 miles. She was different past the stone. I did not expect it, and it undid me by degrees. She got lost. Twice. She took a wrong fork at the fork above the 209th, and we lost an afternoon, and she swore about it, badly, inexpertly, like a woman who has heard swearing her whole life through a serving hatch and never had cause to practice, and I had to turn away and look at the pans until my face was fit to show. She asked people things. That was the thing that took my legs out. At a weigh house at the 212th, she sat down at a stranger's table and asked a salt woman what the work was like, how you cut it, what it did to your hands in winter, whether it was true the crust sang when the sun went off it. And the salt woman talked for an hour, and Mara sat there with her chin on her fist and listened. And I sat beside her and watched a woman who had poured 360 cups for a king and never once been asked what she wanted find out, at 29. That a question is a thing you can hand to somebody. She could not do it to me yet, I want to be honest. 9 days passed the stone and she still could not ask me anything, and I understood why. She had asked me for one thing in her life, at the 152nd in the dark room, and I had given it, and it had taken everything I had, and she had seen that it took everything I had. And she was tired, in a way she had not been at the 84th. Past the stone she was walking on nothing. No memory to lean on, no ledger, no fire to go back to, 130 stones behind her, an old life eaten and a new one not begun. Some nights she just sat with her hands open in her lap and did not mend anything, which frightened me more than the swearing. At the 226, I took the sole off my boot on a bad stretch, and she knelt in the road and sewed it with the all out of her pack, kneeling in the salt with her hair full of white, and I stood there on one foot with my hand on her shoulder for balance and thought, with perfect clarity. I am the king of Carneth, and this is the first time in my life that anybody has touched me while wanting nothing. Stop looking at me like that, she said, not looking up. Like what? Like a man doing sums, said Mara and bit the thread. The road wolves came with us the whole way. That is the part nobody believes. They were not the same wolves, they can't have been. They're the road stock, the long-legged gray ones that run the post routes from way house to way house, and take bread from anyone who offers it and belong to nobody, And there is no possible way the 3 that came out of the ditch grass at the 72nd were the 4 that lay outside the barn at the 241st. But there were always some, and they always went to her. They did not come to me. 9 years and my own road wolves would take meat off my hand and never once put their heads under it. They went to her every time out of every ditch on 250 miles of salt road, and she'd put the back of her hand out without looking up from whatever she was mending and say, "Hello, you," and they'd shove into it and then lie down at the edge of the firelight at a distance, watching the dark. "They're not dogs," she said when I finally said something about it. "They're travelers, same as us. They'll take the bread and they won't take the roof, and quite right too. They've come 300 stones. They've come to the next stone," she said, "same as me." I never got a better answer than that, and I have stopped wanting one. We came up onto the White on the 40th day. I had been there before. Twice, with 40 men and a wagon of water and a purpose, and I had thought I remembered it, and I did not remember it at all, because you cannot come to that place on a horse in a week with men behind you and see it. You have to walk 400 miles. The road just gives out, that's all. It gets fainter and fainter, the milestones stop being kept, the last one has no number left in it, and then you come up over a long, low rise and the country stops. It doesn't end at anything. There's no cliff and no sea and no wall. It's white and it's flat and it goes to the edge of the sky in every direction, and the sky sits down on it about a mile out, and after that you cannot tell which is which. There's no sound at all. Not wind, the wind's there, but it has nothing to pull on. No grass, no trees, no wires, nothing. So it goes past you silently. And the only noise in the whole of creation is the crust cracking under your own boot. She stopped at the top of the rise. I have watched a woman look at the salt flats at the top of the world, and I am not going to be able to give it to you, and I have stopped being ashamed of that. She did not cry. She stood there with her pack still on and her thumbs in the straps and her mouth a little open, and she looked at it for what I later worked out was the better part of an hour, and I stood behind her and did not say a word. Not one. 9 years I had filled every silence that woman ever offered me with questions about ice. Then she said very quietly, "The Carters said it sang." "It does, when the sun comes off it, wait." We waited. The sun went down the sky and touched the white and the crust began to cool, and the whole pan cracked and settled and let go all at once. A long, low, ringing note across 40 miles of salt, like a struck rim, like the sound the inside of a bell makes when the ringing has stopped. She put both hands over her mouth. And then Mara Talving sat down in the middle of the salt flats at the top of the world, in the last of the light, and laughed until she couldn't breathe. 60 years, she said. 60 years I've been washing the cups of people who'd heard that. We made a fire out of what we'd carried, because there is nothing to burn up there, and it was a small, mean fire, and it was the best I have ever sat at. She was quiet for a while. The pan went dark blue and then black, and the stars came down on it, and the horizon disappeared entirely, so that we were sitting in a small orange room with no walls at the exact center of nothing at all. And I understood, with the fire going and my hands on my knees, that there was not one single thing left that I could offer her. I had nothing. No crown, she'd have gone east. No seal, no purse, no riders, no wagons rooted round by the ford. No knowledge. Hers had run out at the 200th and mine had run out with it. I could not save her from anything because there was nothing there to save her from. I could not give her the salt flats. She had walked to them herself on her own feet, at her own pace, in her own life, and I had come along. 360 cups, and I had never once had less to give her than I had at that fire, and it was the first time in 9 years I had been any use at all. So I did the only thing left. I did not stand up. I want that on the record since a great deal else about me is on it. I did not stand up and make a speech, because a speech is a door you hold open, and she had told me that to my face at the 152nd, and I had needed 100 stones to hear it. I sat where I was, with the fire between us and the salt going on forever in every direction, and I put my empty hands where she could see them. "Mara," I said, "where do you want to go?" She did not move. Not for a long moment. The fire went on doing what fires do. Then she looked up, and her face came apart. I had watched that woman be told she'd die at 76 with her hand on a stone and not move a muscle. I had watched her tell me she'd loved me for 40 years in the voice she used for the wool coming late. She had not cried at the 72nd, or at the letter, or at the 200th, or at the singing. She sat in the salt at the top of the world with the firelight on her and cried like a child, with her fists in her eyes, and I did not go round the fire to her, because she had not asked me to, and I had learned that much at least. "That's it," she said when she could. "That's the whole thing. Do you know how long?" 40 years and 9, I know. "You don't." She scrubbed her face with the heel of her hand, furious with it, a woman ambushed. "It's such a small thing, Ivor." It was the first time she had used my name. In either life, I think. I sat very still, the way you do when something has landed on your hand. "That's why nobody ever does it," I said. She thought about it for 2 days. "That is the part I love best, and I have never been able to explain it to anyone at court." She did not answer at the fire. She took the question and carried it for 2 days across the salt, turning it over, and I watched her weigh a thing she was allowed to answer honestly for the first time in 76 years of living, and I did not hurry her, and it nearly killed me, and I would do it again tomorrow. On the second evening she said, "There's a road on the far side." "There is, it comes down the other way. It's not ours." "I know it's not ours." She was looking at the horizon. "There's a country under it. The Carters used to argue about the name. Nobody at my fire had ever been." She said it carefully, like a woman putting a coin on a table that she has kept sewn into a hem for a very long time. "I want to go and see who's there." "All right," I said. She looked round at me sharply. "That's it, all right. You asked me what I'd do at the 152nd, and I shouted at you that I'd do anything," I said. "It turns out I was telling the truth. It's just that anything was never a wagon or a crown. It was this. It was walking that way instead of that way." "You're the king of Carneth." "Yes." "There's a whole country back there." "There is," I said, "and it has a chancellor in it who has run it perfectly well for 9 years, while I rode 9 stones north every week to ask a woman about the ice." She snorted. It was not a dignified noise. I would not trade it. "Sabe will be furious," she said. "Sabe will be relieved," I said. "He rode 4 days to tell me not to do the same thing. I'm going to send him a letter from the far side of the salt telling him I finally managed it, and he's going to read it standing up, and then he's going to sit down." I sent it from the First Way house on the far road, in a country whose name I still cannot spell to the satisfaction of the people who live in it. 4 lines, less than he gave me. "Havard, I did not do the same thing. The crown to my sister's boy at the turn of the year. You will find him tolerable, and he will find you indispensable. Ilfa Corin is to have the 9th Stone Way house at her majority, the ledger with it, all 460 pages, and someone is to tell her whose hand the first 60 are in. Tell her the woman who kept it went north. Tell her she got there. IR. That is the last official act of my reign, and I have never wanted a thing back less. Mara Talvin is asleep 3 feet from me as I set this down, in a room over a road I do not know the name of, and there is a road wolf outside the door that has been following us for 11 days and will not come in on principle. I could tell you 100 things. I could tell you that she took 21 days to ask me a question of her own. 21, I counted, I have caught it off her, and that when it came it was "Do your feet hurt?" and that I lay awake most of that night. I could tell you she still cannot sing. I could tell you that she has begun a new ledger, and that the first page is not a road report. It is a list, in her hand, headed things I have not seen, and that there are 900 entries in it, and that she adds to it faster than we can cross them off, and that this is the only arithmetic in her life that has ever run in the right direction. But I keep coming back to a smaller one, and it is not the salt, and it is not the singing, and it is not the night she said my name. It is that she has stopped counting the stones under her breath. 40 years she measured other people's journeys from a chair beside a fire. 250 stones she counted out loud when she was tired, because that was the shape her whole mind had taken. And somewhere past the white, I do not know where, I was not paying attention, which is the point, she stopped. She doesn't know how far we've come. She has not the faintest idea. I asked her last week out of pure cowardice, wanting to hear it, and she looked up from the ledger and said, "Why, are you lost?" and went back to her list. I know, of course. I always know. It is in my blood, and it will be there till they put me in the ground. Northeast, 411 stones from the 9th and moving. I have never told her the number, and I never will. She isn't the distance anymore. She's the one sitting up.